The monitors screamed. All 18 of them. Dr. Patricia Wells had seen codes before. Thousands of them, but never like this. The infant's vitals were crashing in 3 directions at once, and the room filled with specialists stood frozen because they'd already tried everything. Everything medical science knew. And then the door burst open. Not another doctor. A kid. Maybe 17. Clothes torn. Dirt under his fingernails. Eyes wild. He shoved past the security guard and said 5 words that made no sense. "I know what's killing her." How could a street kid possibly know what 18 of the world's best doctors didn't? 2 days earlier, the Andreas Medical Complex looked like a fortress built of glass and steel and desperation. Victor Andreas sat in the executive lounge on the 42nd floor, staring at reports he could no longer read. The words blurred. His daughter, 3 months old, barely bigger than his forearm, was dying on the 27th floor, and every hour brought new specialists who shook their heads with the same professionally sympathetic expression. They had names for what was wrong: cascading organ failure, idiopathic inflammatory syndrome, genetic anomaly of unknown origin. But names weren't cures, and Victor Andreas hadn't built a pharmaceutical empire by accepting defeat. His wife, Catherine, sat across from him, perfectly still. She hadn't cried in days. There was something worse than crying in her eyes now. A blank acceptance that terrified him more than any diagnosis. "The team from Geneva arrives tonight," Victor said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Will they be doctors 19 and 20? Catherine's tone was flat. "Or do they count as 18.5? Victor's phone buzzed. Another message from Malcolm Torres, his head of security. The third one in an hour. All saying the same thing. "We have a situation developing." Victor ignored it. Malcolm was always finding situations. That's what he paid him for. But right now, the only situation that mattered was 27 floors below, in a climate-controlled room where machines breathed for his daughter because her lungs had forgotten how. The first specialist, Dr. Elizabeth Chun from Johns Hopkins, had arrived 4 weeks ago when the symptoms started. Just a fever, they'd thought. Babies get fevers. But this fever came with seizures. Then the seizures came with organ inflammation. Then the inflammation spread like wildfire through systems that should have been separate. By week 2, they'd flown in immunologists from Stanford. By week 3, geneticists from Cambridge. By week 4, they'd assembled what the medical journals would later call the most comprehensive diagnostic team ever assembled for a single pediatric case. 18 doctors, 47 tests, 0 answers. The complex itself had been transformed. Victor had converted an entire wing into a specialized intensive care unit. He'd installed equipment that most hospitals couldn't afford. He'd hired nurses around the clock, 3 shifts, never fewer than 4 attending his daughter at any moment. He'd spent $11 million in 28 days. Money was irrelevant. He had money. What he didn't have was time. Catherine stood abruptly. "I'm going down." The doctor said. "I don't care what the doctor said." Her voice cracked for the first time in days. "She's my daughter, Victor. If she's going to die, I'm going to be holding her." Victor wanted to say she wasn't going to die. That's what you were supposed to say. But the lie stuck in his throat. Instead, he stood too, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. "You stay here," she said quietly. "Make your calls. Find doctor number 19. I'll be with our baby." She left. Victor stood alone in the lounge, surrounded by leather chairs and mahogany tables and floor-to-ceiling windows, showing a city that didn't care if his daughter lived or died. His phone buzzed again. "Malcolm." He answered this time. "Sir, we have an unauthorized individual attempting to access the medical wing." "Then remove him." "That's your job, Malcolm." "Sir, he claims he has information about your daughter's condition." Victor's jaw tightened. Another conspiracy theorist? Someone selling miracle cures? "I don't think so. He's young. Maybe late teens. He's been trying to get past security for 3 hours. Keeps saying he knows what's wrong, that he's seen it before." "You're calling me about a kid?" "Sir, he knew your daughter's name, and he described symptoms that aren't public knowledge." Victor's hand went cold. "Hold him. I'm coming down." The lobby security office smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Victor arrived to find Malcolm standing outside the holding room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Malcolm Torres had worked personal security for 15 years. Politicians, celebrities, executives who needed someone willing to exist in the gray areas where law and protection overlapped. He was good at reading people. And right now, he looked uncertain. "He's in there," Malcolm said. "Won't give his name. Won't say how he knows what he knows. But, sir, you need to hear what he's saying." Victor pushed through the door. The kid sat in a plastic chair, wrist zip-tied in front of him. His clothes were street clothes, faded jeans, a jacket 2 sizes too big, sneakers held together with duct tape. His face was angular, undernourished, with dark eyes that tracked Victor's entrance like a predator assessing threat level. There was a bruise forming on his left cheek. Fresh. Malcolm's work, probably, when the kid resisted removal. "You want to tell me how you know my daughter's name?" Victor kept his voice level. "Dangerous." The kid met his eyes without flinching. "Emma Andreas. 3 months old. Admitted 4 weeks ago with fever and seizures. The fever responds to acetaminophen but spikes again within 6 hours. The seizures are focal, starting in her right temporal lobe. Her liver enzymes are elevated, but not in a pattern consistent with hepatitis. Her kidneys are failing, but the failure is gradual, not acute. Her lungs are filling with fluid, but it's not pneumonia. And 5 days ago, she stopped responding to her mother's voice." Victor's blood went cold. "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen it before." "You're not a doctor." "No, but I know what's killing her." Victor stepped closer. 18 specialists from around the world are upstairs. You expect me to believe a kid living on the streets knows something they don't?" The kid's expression didn't change. "Your specialists are looking for diseases. This isn't a disease." "Then what is it?" "It's poison." The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Victor's first instinct was to call Malcolm, have the kid removed, ban him from the property. But something in those dark eyes stopped him. Not desperation, not manipulation, something closer to grief. "Explain." The kid leaned forward as much as the zip ties allowed. "It's a synthetic compound, probably something that mimics an autoimmune response, so the doctors waste time treating the symptoms instead of the cause. It's designed to be undetectable in standard tox screens because it breaks down into components that look like natural cellular byproducts. By the time anyone thinks to look for poison, the victim is too far gone for chelation therapy to work." Victor's mind raced. "That's very specific knowledge." "Yeah, for someone who's not a doctor." The kid's jaw tightened. "I didn't say I wasn't trained. I said I wasn't a doctor." "Then what are you?" Silence. The kid looked away for the first time, staring at the wall like he could see through it. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Someone who learned the hard way that you can't trust people just because they wear white coats." Victor's phone vibrated. A text from Catherine. "Emma's oxygen is dropping. They're intubating again." He looked at the kid, at the bruise on his face, at the duct-taped shoes, at eyes that had seen too much for 17 or 18, or however old he was. "If you're lying to me," Victor said slowly, "if this is some kind of scam or delusion or sick joke, I will destroy you. Do you understand?" "I'm not lying." "Then prove it." The kid met his eyes again. "Run a mass spectrometry panel for organoarsenicals. Specifically, look for methylated arsenic compounds with a phenylamine base. Your standard tox screen won't catch it because it degrades into trimethylarsine oxide within 72 hours of administration. But if you check her hair follicles, you'll find trace deposits near the root." Victor stared at him. That was beyond specific. That was the kind of knowledge you got from years of pharmacological study or from being intimately familiar with how a very particular poison worked. "Malcolm," Victor called without breaking eye contact. "Cut him loose." "Sir." "Do it." Malcolm entered, produced a knife, sliced through the zip ties. The kid rubbed his wrists, watching Victor with that same unreadable expression. "What's your name?" Victor asked. Hesitation. "Then call me Alex." "Not your real name." "Does it matter?" "It probably should have." But right now, with Emma 27 floors above them dying by inches, Victor found he didn't care. You're going to tell Dr. Wells exactly what you just told me. If she confirms this is worth pursuing, you're going to tell her everything you know about this poison, where it comes from, how it's administered, what the antidote is. There's no antidote, Alex said quietly. Not exactly, but there's a treatment protocol. It's complicated, and it requires starting within 48 hours of the last dose. How long has it been since Emma's last dose? Alex's expression darkened. I don't know, but if she's been deteriorating for 4 weeks, someone's been giving it to her regularly, which means they have access. The implication hit Victor like a fist. Someone in the complex. Someone with access to Emma. Someone he trusted. He pulled out his phone, dialed Dr. Wells directly. She answered on the first ring, voice tense. Mr. Andreas, we're about to start another round of... Patricia, I need you to run a test. Immediately. He repeated everything Alex had said. There was a long pause on the other end. Mr. Andreas, that's unusually specific. Where did you get this information? Does it matter? Another pause. Then, give me 40 minutes. Victor hung up, looked at Alex. You're coming with me. Malcolm stepped forward. Sir, we don't know anything about this kid. He could be the only person who knows what's killing my daughter. So yes, Malcolm, he's coming with me. They rode the elevator in silence. Malcolm stood between Victor and Alex, hand resting near his concealed weapon, posture radiating distrust. Alex stared at the floor numbers ticking upward, jaw clenched, breathing carefully controlled. Victor watched them both and wondered what calculation he just made. 18 doctors had failed. What were the odds a street kid with no credentials had the answer? But something in his gut, the same instinct that had built his empire from nothing, said to listen. The pediatric intensive care unit was quiet in the way hospitals get quiet, when everyone's given up pretending things are okay. Machines beeped in careful rhythm. Nurses moved like ghosts between rooms. Dr. Wells met them in the hallway outside Emma's isolation room, tablet in hand, expression professionally neutral in a way that meant something significant had just happened. The mass spec isn't complete, she said without preamble, but I ran a preliminary screen on the hair sample. Mr. Andreas, there are metallic compounds in your daughter's follicles that shouldn't be there. They're consistent with chronic exposure to an arsenical derivative. Victor felt the floor tilt. Poison. Someone's been poisoning her. We need confirmation, but yes, it appears so. How? How has no one caught this in 4 weeks? Dr. Wells glanced at Alex, then back to Victor. Because whoever chose this compound knew exactly what they were doing. It's sophisticated, almost elegant from a toxicological standpoint. It mimics autoimmune cascade disorder, which is why we've been treating her for inflammation instead of chelation. Your source was correct. This wouldn't show up on our standard panels. Victor turned to Alex. You said there's a treatment. It's not simple, Alex said. His voice had changed, become more clinical. The arsenic binds to sulfhydryl groups in her cells. Standard chelation with DMSA or DMPS won't work because the compound's been modified to resist binding. You need a 3-stage protocol. First, you stabilize her organ function with targeted antioxidants, glutathione, N-acetylcysteine, selenium. Second, you use a modified chelation agent, probably British anti-leucite if you can source it, combined with hemodialysis to clear the metabolites. Third, you address the cellular damage with... He trailed off. Dr. Wells was staring at him like he'd just spoken ancient Greek. How do you know this? She asked quietly. Alex's face went blank. Does it matter? Young man, what you just described is a protocol that doesn't exist in any medical literature I know. That level of knowledge doesn't come from reading WebMD. Can you do it or not? Dr. Wells looked at Victor. With his guidance, possibly. But I need to understand the source. If this is theoretical... It's not theoretical, Alex said sharply. I've seen it work. Where? Somewhere you don't need to know about. The tension in the hallway ratcheted up. Malcolm's hand moved closer to his weapon. Dr. Wells crossed her arms. Victor held up a hand. Patricia, Can you save my daughter with what he's telling you? She hesitated. Then I think we have to try, because everything else has failed. Then do it. Mr. Andreas, I need to know more about. No, you need to save Emma. Everything else is secondary. Dr. Wells looked at Alex for a long moment, then nodded. I'll need you to walk me through the protocol, step by step. And if at any point I think you're guessing or making this up, I stop. Understood. Alex nodded. They worked through the night. Victor watched through the observation window as Dr. Wells and her team followed Alex's instructions. The kid stood in the corner of Emma's room, masked and gowned like the medical staff, voice steady as he guided them through a treatment protocol that seemed to exist nowhere in official medicine. He spoke like someone who'd done this before. Measured dosages without consulting references. Anticipated complications before they arose. Corrected Dr. Wells twice when she started to deviate from the sequence. Catherine arrived an hour in, eyes red and exhausted. Victor, what's happening? Malcolm said you brought someone in. Someone who? He knows what's wrong with Emma. How? I don't know. But Patricia believes him. They stood together at the window, watching their daughter's tiny form, surrounded by machines and specialists and one 17-year-old kid who shouldn't have been there. Emma's oxygen saturation began to improve. Slowly. Her heart rate stabilized. Her kidney function showed marginal improvement on the monitors. By dawn, she opened her eyes. Catherine broke. She rushed into the room, ignoring Dr. Wells' protests about contamination protocol, and stood over Emma's incubator with tears streaming down her face. Emma's tiny hand closed around Catherine's finger. Just a reflex, maybe. But it was more than she'd done in 5 days. Victor felt something crack in his chest. Relief. And underneath it, a cold fury beginning to build. Because if Alex was right, if someone had been deliberately poisoning his daughter, then someone with access to this facility was responsible. Someone he'd trusted with Emma's life. He turned to Malcolm. I want security footage for every person who's entered Emma's room in the past 4 weeks. Staff, visitors, medical personnel, everyone. Malcolm nodded. I'll pull it. And Malcolm, be discreet. If someone here is responsible, I don't want them knowing we're looking. Alex emerged from the isolation room an hour later, stripping off the gown and mask. His face was drawn, exhausted. Dr. Wells followed, looking stunned. She's responding, Dr. Wells said. I don't understand how, but she's responding. Her inflammatory markers are down 40%. Her oxygen levels are almost normal. If this continues, you saved her life, Victor finished. He turned to Alex. Who are you? Really? Alex looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. Wait. Victor caught up, grabbed his arm. Alex tensed like he might run. You can't just disappear. Someone poisoned my daughter. You knew what it was instantly. That's not coincidence. Let go. Not until you explain. Mr. Andreas. Alex's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. You don't want my explanations. You want your daughter safe. I showed you how. That's enough. It's not enough. You walked in here with knowledge that saved her life. Knowledge that doesn't come from nowhere. Knowledge that suggests you've been around this kind of poisoning before. Which means either you're part of how this happened, or you know who is. Alex went very still. You think I hurt your daughter? I think you know more than you're saying. They stared at each other. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Alex pulled free and stepped inside. Victor followed. You're not leaving until I understand what's happening. You don't want to understand. Trust me. Try me. The elevator descended in silence. When it reached the lobby, Alex walked straight toward the exit. Malcolm appeared from nowhere, blocking the door. Alex stopped, breathing hard, looking cornered. Let him go, Victor said quietly. Malcolm didn't move. Sir, he's a material witness. If someone poisoned your daughter. I said let him go. Malcolm stepped aside reluctantly. Alex pushed through the door into early morning light. Victor followed him onto the street. The city was waking up, traffic building, pedestrians hurrying to work, the sun just clearing the buildings to the east. Alex walked fast, hands in his pockets, not looking back. My daughter almost died. Victor called after him. You saved her. That deserves more than running away. Alex stopped, turned. His face in the dawn light looked younger and older at the same time. You want to know who I am? Fine. My name is Alex Reeves. 4 years ago, I lived in a facility upstate, a private research center. Very exclusive, very expensive, very secret. They studied rare diseases. That's what they told the families. But what they really studied was bioweapons. How to make poisons that couldn't be detected. How to make people sick in ways that looked natural. They tested their compounds on patients. People who couldn't fight back. People no one cared about. Victor felt ice forming in his stomach. I was training to be a lab assistant, Alex continued. His voice was flat now, reciting facts. 16 years old. Good at chemistry. They liked me. Taught me everything. How to synthesize compounds. How to predict toxicological responses. How to mask evidence. And then one day I realized what they were doing to the patients. What I was helping them do. You left. I burned it down. Alex's eyes hardened. The whole facility. Every lab. Every record. And then I disappeared. When was this? 3 years ago. You were 16. Yeah. Victor's mind raced through implications. The compound someone used on Emma. That's from your facility. I don't know. But it's similar. Same principles. Same sophistication. Which means either someone else from that program survived, or someone got hold of the research before I destroyed it. Who ran the facility? A pharmaceutical company. They called it Advanced Research. Pioneer Medical Solutions. But the real money came from private contracts. Governments. Corporations. People who wanted plausible deniability. Victor's blood ran cold. I know that company. They were a competitor. We tried to acquire them 8 years ago. They refused. They refused because their real value wasn't in the patents they published. It was in the weapons they developed. And you think someone connected to them poisoned Emma? Why? Alex looked at him with something almost like pity. Figure it out, Mr. Andreas. You're a smart man. Who benefits if your daughter dies? Who gets control of your company? Your assets? Your research? The fury that had been building in Victor's chest exploded into something nuclear. Because there was only one answer. Only one person who stood to gain everything if Emma died, and he and Catherine were destroyed by grief. His brother, David Andreas, Vice President of Andreas Pharmaceuticals. Heir apparent if Victor stepped down. A man who'd been resentful of Victor's success for 30 years. A man who'd been at the complex every day, visiting Emma, offering support, expressing concern. A man who'd have had perfect access to Emma's room. Victor pulled out his phone, dialed Malcolm. I need you to pull all footage of my brother visiting Emma. Every single time. And Malcolm, do it now. He hung up. Looked at Alex. If you're right about this. I'm right. I've seen this before. The pattern is always the same. Slow poisoning. Symptoms that mimic natural disease. By the time anyone suspects murder, the victim is dead and the evidence is degraded. Your brother probably started before Emma was even born. Low doses during your wife's pregnancy, maybe. Just enough to prime the systems for failure after birth. Victor felt sick. How do we prove it? Check his finances. See if he's been in contact with anyone from Pioneer Medical Solutions or any of its subsidiary companies. Check for unusual purchases, specialty chemicals, lab equipment, private consultations with toxicologists. And check the security logs. If he's been accessing Emma's room outside normal visiting hours, that's your evidence. And if we can prove it. Alex's expression went cold. Then you make sure he never hurts anyone again. They stood on the street corner as the city woke up around them. Victor felt like the world had tilted on its axis. 24 hours ago, his daughter was dying, and he didn't know why. Now she was recovering, and he knew exactly who was responsible. The rage was so pure it almost felt clean. Come back inside, Victor said. I need your help. No, Alex, you have what you need. Go protect your daughter. I'm done. You're not done. You're a witness. You understand how this poison works. If we're going to build a case against David, I'm not testifying. I'm not going public. The moment I do, everyone connected to Pioneer comes looking for me. I survived 3 years by staying invisible. I'm not changing that now. Then what? You just disappear again. That was always the plan. Victor wanted to argue, wanted to force the kid to stay, to help, to see this through. But he looked at Alex's face and saw something he recognized from his own mirror on bad days. The exhaustion of someone who'd been running too long and couldn't afford to stop. "Give me your phone number," Victor said, "in case we need you." "I don't have a phone." "Then how do I contact you?" "You don't." Alex turned and walked away. This time, Victor let him go. He stood on the corner and watched the kid vanish into the morning crowd, just another anonymous face in a city of millions. Then he pulled out his phone and called his attorney. If David had done this, if his own brother had tried to murder his infant daughter, then Victor was going to make sure he paid for it in every way possible. Legal consequences, financial consequences. And if those weren't enough, Victor knew people who specialized in the kind of consequences that didn't make it into courtrooms. But first, he needed proof. Malcolm had the footage ready by the time Victor returned to the complex. They set up in a conference room. Victor, Malcolm, Catherine, and Dr. Wells. The videos played on a large screen, showing every recorded instance of David Andreas entering Emma's isolation room over the past 4 weeks. At first, nothing looked suspicious. David visited like any concerned uncle would, stood by the incubator, spoke softly to Emma, placed his hand against the glass. But Malcolm had flagged 6 instances where David's visits lasted longer than usual, and in 4 of those instances he'd been alone in the room for 30 to 90 seconds while the attending nurse stepped out. "Rewind that one," Victor said, pointing at the screen. "The visit from 2 weeks ago." Malcolm rewound. They watched David enter. The nurse left to check on something. David moved closer to the incubator. His hand went into his pocket, came out holding something small. He reached through the access port, the one used for adjusting Emma's position or checking her vitals, and his hand was inside for maybe 5 seconds. Then he withdrew, closed the port, and stepped back. The whole thing took 10 seconds, casual enough that anyone watching wouldn't have thought twice. What did he just do? Catherine whispered. He administered a dose, Dr. Wells said quietly. Through the foreport, probably. Or possibly a topical application to her skin. With the right compound, you'd only need a drop. Victor's hands clenched into fists. How many times did he do this? For confirmed instances where he was alone long enough, Malcolm said. But there could be others. The cameras don't have a perfect angle on the incubator access ports. Catherine made a sound that wasn't quite a sob. Your brother, your own brother, tried to kill our daughter. Victor couldn't speak. The rage had gone past nuclear into something cold and final. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, checked his brother's trust fund distributions. David had been given a generous stipend from the family trust, enough to live comfortably without working. But 3 months ago, there had been a large withdrawal, $2 million, sent to a consulting firm in the Cayman Islands. Victor traced the consulting firm. Shell company. No real business. But the registration documents listed a director, Dr. Helena Marsh, former head of pharmacological research at Pioneer Medical Solutions. The connection was there. Undeniable. Malcolm called the police. Sir, are you sure you want to go that route? With your connections, we could handle this more discreetly. Victor looked at Catherine, at Dr. Wells, at the footage frozen on screen, showing his brother's hand inside Emma's incubator. Then he thought about Alex, a 16-year-old kid who'd burned down a research facility and spent 3 years living on the streets because he couldn't trust the system to deliver justice. No, Victor said slowly. We do this right. Public charges. Public trial. I want everyone to know what he did. He'll have the best lawyers money can buy, Malcolm warned. So will we. And we have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. The arrest happened that afternoon. David Andreas was detained at his penthouse apartment on charges of attempted murder, criminal poisoning, and conspiracy. The news broke like a bomb across financial networks. Pharmaceutical executive charged with poisoning his own niece. The story had everything: wealth, family betrayal, infant victim, corporate conspiracy. David's lawyers screamed innocence, called it a vendetta, demanded immediate release. But then the prosecutors released the footage. For instances of David alone with Emma, hands in the incubator, right before her symptoms worsened, combined with the financial transfers to Dr. Marsh and the chemical analysis matching compounds to Pioneer Medical Solutions research, the case was airtight. By evening, the complex was swarmed with reporters. Victor issued a single statement: "My daughter is recovering. Justice will be served. That's all I have to say." Catherine stayed with Emma, who was improving hour by hour. Dr. Wells confirmed the treatment protocol was working. The poison was clearing from her system. Her organs were healing. She'd need monitoring, maybe long-term therapies, but she would live. Victor stood at the window of his office, looking down at the street where he'd last seen Alex. The kid had saved Emma's life and asked for nothing. Refused payment. Refused recognition. Just walked away like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Victor made a call to his head of human resources. "I need you to set up a fund. Scholarship program. For kids aging out of foster care or living on the streets who show aptitude for medical sciences. Full ride. Stipend. Housing. Everything they need." "How much are we talking, sir?" "Whatever it costs. And I want it operational in 6 months." "Does this program have a name?" Victor thought about a kid with duct-taped shoes and eyes that had seen too much. "Call it the Reeves Initiative." He hung up and turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, Alex was probably still running, still hiding, still carrying the weight of what he'd seen and what he'd done. Victor couldn't fix that, couldn't give him back the years he'd lost or the childhood that had been stolen. But maybe he could help other kids like him, kids who fell through the cracks but had potential that the world needed. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. 3 weeks later, Emma came home. She was thriving now, hitting developmental milestones, responding to sounds and faces. The specialist said her prognosis was excellent. Whatever damage the poison had caused, her body was resilient enough to heal. She'd need follow-up care, regular checkups, monitoring for any long-term effects. But she would live. She would grow. She would have a future her uncle had tried to steal. David's trial was scheduled for 6 months out. The evidence was overwhelming. His lawyers were trying to negotiate a plea, but Victor had instructed his legal team to reject anything less than full admission of guilt and maximum sentencing. David would spend the rest of his life in prison. Dr. Marsh had been extradited from the Cayman Islands, also facing charges. The investigation into Pioneer Medical Solutions had expanded, uncovering evidence of illegal human experimentation going back 15 years. Victor wondered how many other victims there had been. How many people had died from mysterious illnesses that were actually carefully crafted poisons? How many families had grieved without ever knowing the truth? He was in his home office, reviewing the Reeves Initiative proposal, when Malcolm knocked. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Alex." Victor's head snapped up. "Let him in." Alex looked different, cleaner. His hair was cut. His clothes were new, jeans that fit, a jacket that wasn't falling apart, shoes without duct tape. But his eyes were the same, guarded, wary, ready to run. "I heard your brother was arrested," Alex said. "Thought I'd check if Emma was okay." "She's perfect. Thanks to you." Alex nodded slowly. "Good. How did you know to come here? To the complex that day?" "I've been tracking Pioneer research for 3 years. Anytime I hear about a mysterious illness that matches their toxicological profiles, I investigate. I saw the news stories about the billionaire's daughter with 18 specialists who couldn't figure out what was wrong. It fit the pattern. So I came. You took a massive risk. Coming here, revealing what you know. Kids don't deserve to die for adult sins." Victor studied him. "You're not going to disappear again, are you?" "That was the plan. I have a better plan." Victor pulled out the Reeves Initiative folder, slid it across the desk. "Full scholarship. Medical school if you want it. Or research. Or pharmacology. Whatever you choose. Room, board, stipend. Everything covered. No questions asked about your past. Alex stared at the folder like it might explode. Why? Because you saved my daughter. Because you've been running for 3 years, and that's long enough. Because you have knowledge and skills the world needs, and wasting them on the streets is criminal. I burned down a research facility. You were 16, and you were right to do it. The law won't see it that way. Let me worry about the law. You worry about building a future. Alex picked up the folder, opened it slowly. Read through the program details. His hands were shaking slightly. This is real. As real as I can make it. I don't trust easily, Mr. Andreas. I know. You don't have to trust me. Trust yourself. You knew what was killing Emma when 18 specialists didn't. That kind of mind doesn't belong on the streets. Alex was quiet for a long time. Then, can I think about it? Take all the time you need. But Alex, you can't run forever. Eventually you have to decide if you're going to let your past define your future, or if you're going to build something better. Alex stood, still holding the folder. Thank you. For Emma. For this. For not asking questions I couldn't answer. Come back when you're ready. Alex nodded and left. Victor watched him go and wondered if he'd ever see the kid again. But 3 days later, Alex called the number on the scholarship application. He was ready to accept. Ready to stop running. Ready to try. Catherine found Victor in Emma's nursery that evening, watching their daughter sleep. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. Malcolm told me Alex enrolled in the program. Yeah, you're a good man, Victor Andreas. I almost lost our daughter because I trusted the wrong person. And you saved her because you listened to a stranger. That takes courage. Emma stirred in her crib, making soft baby noises. Victor reached down, gently stroked her tiny hand. Her fingers curled around his thumb with strength that made his heart ache. She's going to be okay, Catherine whispered. She's going to be better than okay. She's going to be strong, brave, and she'll never know how close we came to losing her. Maybe that's a gift. Victor thought about Alex, about the facility he'd burned, about 3 years living on streets because he couldn't trust anyone, about a kid who saved a life and asked for nothing in return. Maybe it is, he said quietly. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at her father, and for just a moment, maybe imagination, maybe recognition, she smiled. 6 months passed. Emma was thriving, walking early, babbling constantly. The specialist said she showed no lasting effects from the poisoning. Her organs were healthy. Her development was normal. She was a happy, curious, bright little girl who had no idea she'd survived something that should have killed her. David's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Footage, financial records, chemical analysis, testimony from Dr. Marsh, who'd flipped in exchange for a reduced sentence. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. David Andreas was sentenced to 40 years, without parole. He'd die in prison. Victor felt nothing when the verdict was read. No satisfaction. No closure. Just empty space where his brother used to be. Alex graduated from an accelerated pre-medical program with honors. He was starting medical school in the fall, specializing in toxicology. He wanted to study poisons, not to create them, but to understand how to detect and counteract them, how to save people the way he'd saved Emma. He came to dinner at the Andreas home once a month. At first, it was awkward. Alex didn't know how to exist in their world of wealth and comfort. But gradually, he relaxed, laughed at Catherine's jokes, played with Emma, who adored him, shared stories about his classes and his research. He never talked about the facility, never mentioned the 3 years on the streets. That past was sealed. But sometimes Victor caught him watching Emma with an expression that was both protective and haunted, and he understood that Alex would carry those years forever. Some trauma didn't heal. It just became part of who you were. One evening, after dinner, Victor and Alex stood on the terrace, while Emma napped inside. I got a letter from Dr. Marsh, Alex said quietly. From prison. What did it say? She apologized. Said Pioneer Medical Solutions manipulated her. That she didn't understand what they were really doing until it was too late. She asked for my forgiveness. Did you give it? Alex was quiet. Then no. Because she did understand. They all did. They just didn't care. Victor nodded. The system failed you. It failed all of you at that facility. The system's designed to protect people with power. Kids in state care, orphans, runaways. We're invisible. No one cares what happens to us until someone like you loses a daughter. Then suddenly it matters. That's not fair. No, but it's true. Victor couldn't argue. Because Alex was right. The system had failed. And if Emma hadn't been the daughter of a billionaire, if she'd been just another sick kid in a public hospital, would anyone have investigated? Would anyone have uncovered the truth? Probably not. The Reeves Initiative is expanding, Victor said. We're adding outreach programs, finding kids who are at risk, giving them support before they end up on the streets. It's not perfect. It won't save everyone, but it's something. It's more than something, Alex said. It's more than anyone did for me. You saved yourself. I got lucky. Most kids don't. They stood in silence, watching the city lights spread out below. After a while, Catherine came out carrying Emma, who was awake and fussy. Alex took her without being asked, bouncing her gently until she calmed. Emma grabbed his finger, pulled it toward her mouth. Alex laughed. She's going to break hearts when she grows up, he said. She already breaks mine every day, Catherine replied. Victor watched them, his wife, his daughter, and the street kid who'd become part of their family in the strangest way possible. This wasn't how he'd imagined his life going, but somehow, it was better than anything he could have planned. 2 years later, Alex published his first research paper, Detection Protocols for Synthetic Organoarsenicals in Pediatric Toxicology. It was groundbreaking, created a testing standard that hospitals around the world began adopting, saved lives. The paper was dedicated to Emma Andreas, age 2, survivor. For years later, Emma started kindergarten. She was bright, curious, stubborn in the best way. She loved science, loved asking questions. Victor wondered if she'd grow up to be a doctor like Alex, or maybe an engineer, or an artist. It didn't matter. She was alive. That was enough. 6 years later, Alex graduated medical school top of his class. Victor and Catherine attended the ceremony. Emma, now 6, sat between them wearing a fancy dress she'd picked out herself. When Alex walked across the stage to receive his diploma, Emma stood up and cheered so loud the entire auditorium turned to look. Alex saw them and smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. After the ceremony, Emma ran up to him. Dr. Alex, Dr. Alex. He caught her, spun her around. Not yet. I still have residency. But you're going to be a doctor. A real one. Just like you said. Yeah, just like I said. She hugged him tight. You're my favorite. I'm honored. Victor and Catherine caught up. Catherine hugged Alex, wiping tears she wasn't embarrassed about. Victor shook his hand, felt the firm grip of someone who'd survived hell and come out stronger. Proud of you, Victor said simply. Couldn't have done it without you. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. They went to dinner, all of them, plus a few of Alex's classmates. The conversation was loud and happy. Emma dominated attention as 6-year-olds do, telling elaborate stories about her day and asking endless questions. Alex answered everyone patiently, never talking down to her, always treating her questions as serious. At one point, Emma leaned close to Alex and whispered, Did you really save my life when I was a baby? Alex glanced at Victor and Catherine, uncertain. Victor nodded slightly. Yeah, Alex said quietly. I did. Why? Because you deserve to be saved. Were you scared? Terrified? But you did it anyway. Someone had to. Emma thought about this seriously. Then, when I grow up, I want to save people too. Then I'll teach you everything I know. Victor watched them, this little girl who'd almost died, and this young man who'd almost been lost, and felt something settle in his chest. Not closure. Maybe there was no such thing as closure, but peace. The knowledge that sometimes terrible things happened, and sometimes good people fought back, and sometimes, if you were incredibly lucky, loved one. That was enough. And this is where everything shifted, Because now it wasn't just about surviving the poison or stopping the betrayal. It was about building something that mattered from wreckage. About turning trauma into purpose. About proving that one person caring enough could change everything. Emma is 12 now. She volunteers at the Reeves Initiative on weekends, helping younger kids with science projects. She's talked about going to medical school like Alex, though Victor suspects she might end up doing something even more ambitious. She has that quality, the inability to see a problem without wanting to fix it. Alex is an attending physician at Andreas Medical Complex. He runs the toxicology department. Under his leadership, the hospital has implemented detection protocols that have caught 4 cases of deliberate poisoning in 2 years, cases that would have gone unnoticed under the old systems. He's saved lives, multiple lives, and he's trained other doctors to recognize patterns that most people miss. He still lives simply, drives a practical car, lives in a modest apartment, gives most of his salary to programs supporting foster youth and homeless teenagers. Victor offered to increase his pay multiple times. Alex always declines, says he has everything he needs. On Emma's 12th birthday, the family gathered for dinner. Victor, Catherine, Emma, and Alex, who'd become the brother Victor should have had instead of the one who tried to murder his daughter. They ate cake, told stories, laughed about Emma's terrible jokes. At the end of the evening, Emma gave Alex a handmade card. Inside, she'd written, "Thank you for being brave when no one else was. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. I love you." Alex read it twice. His eyes were bright when he looked up. "Love you too, Em." Victor watched this moment and thought about the day Alex had walked into his complex with duct-taped shoes and knowledge that shouldn't exist. About how close they'd all come to losing everything. About how one person's courage had rippled out and changed the trajectory of all their lives. Sometimes you don't know you're waiting for someone until they arrive. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving most. And sometimes, if you're incredibly, impossibly lucky, you get the chance to save them back. Emma is 12. She's healthy. She's brilliant. She's loved. And she has no idea how extraordinary it is that she exists at all. That's the gift Alex gave them. Not just Emma's life, but the chance to live in a world where that day didn't define them, where trauma became transformation, where poison became purpose. Victor still thinks about David sometimes. His brother died in prison last year. Heart attack. Victor didn't attend the funeral, didn't mourn, just felt the same empty space he'd felt since the trial. Maybe forgiveness would come someday. Maybe it wouldn't. Either way, he'd moved on. Because that's what you do. You survive the worst. You protect what matters. You build something better from the ashes. And you never, ever stop being grateful for the people who show up when you need them most. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had someone come into your life at exactly the moment you needed them? Someone who changed everything just by showing up? Let me know in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, maybe hit that subscribe button. We could all use more reminders that heroes exist, even if they don't look like we expect them to.